Welcome to Biochemistry Unfolded, From Atoms to Algorithms, an online podcast on the topic of biochemistry and biophysics. Hey, good afternoon. Welcome back to another episode of Biochemistry Unfolded, From Atoms to Algorithms. Today I'm looking at a popular new book by Andy Weir. You've probably heard of it, Project Hail Mary. It's now a major motion picture starring Ryan Gosling as Dr. Ryland Grace. He was a molecular biologist turned middle school science teacher, and he eventually found himself as the sole survivor of the Hail Mary on a mission to find a solution to the astrophage problem that was facing our sun, and ultimately to save humanity. No pressure, right? Both the movie and the book were excellent. It was full of science, very entertaining. If you haven't seen the movie yet, I highly recommend it. The book, of course, goes into a lot more detail, but the movie certainly doesn't disappoint. I think you'll find either one very interesting. Now, in the story, Dr. Grace's character wrote a fairly controversial paper titled An Analysis of Water-Based Assumptions and Recalibrations of Expectations for Evolutionary Models. And so this is actually a pretty controversial paper, and it argued that life does not have to be water-based. And that directly challenges one of the central assumptions of astrobiology and biochemistry itself, that liquid water is a universal requirement for life. The importance of water in biochemistry is covered very early on in just about every major biochemistry textbook that's used in college courses today. We use Garrett and Grisham's textbook that I use in our upper division courses here. And that covers water and aqueous solutions as early as chapter 2. So you're going to be very hard pressed. You're going to be very hard pressed to find a scientist that's going to dispute water's importance to life. Yet Dr. Grace did just that. He also argued that the traditional Goldilocks zone, that's the orbital region in a solar system where liquid water can exist on a planet's surface, was too Earth-centric to be a reliable guide for finding extraterrestrial life. The paper became rather infamous, not only because of its scientific claims, but also because of how Grace wrote it. He actually ridiculed the prevailing consensus, and even a report included a section with the provocative title, "The Goldilocks Zone is for Idiots." He also criticized fellow scientists by name, and he used rather insulting language rather than the measured tone that's expected in academic publishing. This effectively ended his research career, and it led him to become a middle school science teacher, which is where he kind of was at the beginning of the book. Now, one of the interesting twists in the novel is that Grace initially sees himself as kind of a misunderstood visionary. However, Eva Stratt in the book, several other scientists as well, kind of imply that the real problem wasn't the scientific hypothesis itself. It was actually his inability to accept criticism and his rather unprofessional behavior. So his colleagues largely respected his intellect and his ideas, but he alienated them by turning scientific disagreement into personal attacks. Generally a bad idea in anyone's career. Now, ironically, by the end of the story, Dr. Grace turned out to be wrong about the specific example he hoped would vindicate him, that an interstellar organism that literally lives on the sun's energy in outer space could not possibly be water-based. In fact, he considers the opposite, that astrophage is water-based and also has many of the same cellular structural features as our own as cells we find here on Earth. And then he later encounters Rocky and the Iridians. These are rock-like aliens from a boiling 210 degrees Celsius world with an atmosphere containing ammonia. Yet Arid's atmosphere is also 29 times that of Earth's, and water actually stays liquid at extreme temperatures in that environment when you factor in the pressure. So Dr. Grace actually discovers that Rocky's species does, in fact, use water as a biological solvent. And the vast majority of Rocky's 2-meter radius body is composed of heavy rock-like inorganic materials, but beneath this hard shell are a few kilograms of carbon-based, water-reliant worker cells that act as microscopic builders, repairing and maintaining the mineral infrastructure around it. And furthermore, Rocky's muscles also act like tiny steam engines. His body has porous muscle sacs that contain a small amount of liquid water. And so by using a network of hot circulatory vessels, the water is superheated into steam, and that causes the vesicles to rapidly expand and move the limbs of the alien. Because his planet is essentially a vacuum filled with toxic ammonia, Rocky's organic cells are internally sealed. And so he carries his own water, plant-like cells, as well as animal-like cells, which they constantly cycle between oxygen and carbon dioxide internally, so he never has to actually breathe. And because of this, Weir uses this to explore the concept of panspermia. And that suggests that Earth life, astrophage, as well as Iridians, they all share a common evolutionary ancestor that was seeded from the same system, maybe Arid, out in the galaxy. And that's why Rocky ultimately relies on the same fundamental water-based biochemistry as astrophage and humans here on Earth. So nevertheless, the broader point that life can exist in environments far outside Earth's traditional habitable zone, that receives partial validation, even if for reasons different from what is predicted. But before we get into the possibility of non-water-based life, let's consider some of the chemical and the physical properties of water that make it essential to life as we know it. And so water is essential to life due to its unique chemical and chemical structure and physical structure as well. Its polar nature allows it to act as a versatile solvent, dissolve nutrients, regulate temperature, and facilitate vital biochemical reactions inside cells. The critical properties of water that support life include, number one, its role as a universal solvent. Water's polarity enables it to dissolve a vast range of polar and ionic substances, hydrophilic substances. And so this acts as a transport medium for nutrients and waste within organisms and provides the necessary medium for cellular biochemical reactions. Number two, water has a very high specific heat capacity, and water resists sudden temperature changes. And this helps to stabilize internal body temperatures, homeostasis, and moderates global climates. Number three, it has cohesion and adhesion properties. Cohesion is water sticking to other water via like hydrogen bonds. Adhesion is water sticking to other surfaces. And so this creates a very high surface tension. Together, both of these together, they allow capillary action. And that's how plants actually transport water from the roots all the way up to their leaves. So that's very, very important, capillary action. Number 4, the density of water, and especially the density of ice. Unlike most liquids, water actually expands and becomes less dense as it freezes. This allows ice to float on the top of lakes and oceans, or on the top of your drink in the summertime. And that insulates the liquid water beneath. And in lakes and oceans in the wintertime, that actually provides, that insulates the liquid water and protects aquatic life during freezing temperatures. So life can actually exist. Next, of course, water has a very high heat of vaporization. And so water absorbs a fairly significant amount of heat when it evaporates. And organisms use this property for evaporative cooling, sweating, panting, and that helps prevent overheating. Water, we're essentially all water cooled. And so that's a very important process, that heating and cooling. And so because of these properties, and because water is essential for all life as we know it, astrobiologists are going to search for the presence of water on other planets when searching for life in the universe. The universe is a pretty big place. It also seems reasonable to consider that life on other planets may evolve using alternative chemicals and other solvents. So the search for alternative solvents for life is an active area of astrobiology. Water's exceptional properties, liquid over a broad temperature range, dissolving many compounds, high heat capacity, participating in acid-base chemistry. This all suggests that any alternative solvent must provide at least some of these advantages. So we also need to consider small organic or inorganic precursor molecules that can react together or with other molecules to form larger biomolecules to support life. And so some of the leading candidates include ammonia, methane, ethane, formamide, even things like sulfuric acid and hydrogen fluoride. You may not think about those, but we'll talk about that a little bit. First of all, let's cover ammonia. Ammonia is often considered the strongest alternative to water for living organisms. Like water, it's a polar molecule. It's capable of hydrogen bonding, although the bonds are a little weaker. Nitrogen's a little less electronegative. Life based on ammonia would likely function at temperatures between about minus 78 degrees Celsius and minus 33 degrees Celsius under Earth-like pressures, though higher pressures could extend this range, as we depict arid in Project Hail Mary. Metabolic reactions would probably proceed much more slowly than on Earth with ammonia as its solvent. Let's think about methane and ethane. Now, these are the two simplest hydrocarbons. With, methane has one carbon, ethane has two carbons. Methane and ethane are prime candidates for non-water-based life because they remain liquid at extremely cold temperatures, such as the temperatures found on Saturn's moon Titan. In these environments, they actually act as a solvent to dissolve and transport nutrients, much like water does on Earth. So it can have very similar properties there. And it would also prevent organic molecules from freezing solid. And these hydrocarbons also form a complete weather and geological cycle as well. Just as water evaporates, clouds form, it rains on Earth. Methane and ethane can evaporate, they can form clouds, and rain down onto the surface. So methane and ethane are also chemically versatile and can combine with nitrogen as well as carbon to create a massive variety of complex organic compounds. And even on Earth today, hydrocarbons form the backbone of a lot of living a lot of biomolecules. So water-based life relies on lipid bilayers as well. Phosphorus oxygen heads, carbon tails. In a methane-based system, molecules like acrylonitrile could fold into inverse cellular structures known as azotosomes. And these could remain stable and flexible in liquid hydrocarbons. Energetically, instead of taking in oxygen and glucose, hypothetical methane-based organisms could consume hydrogen and acetylene to produce energy, and that would produce methane as a byproduct. So we kind of have an energetic basis for methane and ethane as well. Perhaps the most famous testing ground, the most interesting site that we can look at right now is going to be Saturn's largest moon, Titan. And so this has a fairly frigid climate. It drops to minus 179 degrees Celsius, and that freezes any water solid. But it provides vast, stable seas and lakes filled with liquid methane and ethane. And so astrobiologists have designed concrete theoretical models for these environments to help determine how non-water-based organisms might process information and even reproduce in that environment. They don't really have any evidence for such life that exists, of course, but Titan does remain one of the most intriguing locations in the solar system to investigate some of these theories here. So let's look at formamide. And this is also considered a non-water-based life solvent because of its chemical structure, and it makes it a fairly excellent solvent. It's also the simplest amide. And so the amide functional group also constitutes the peptide bond between amino acids and proteins. These are biomolecules. And so we have two hydrogen bond donors and a hydrogen bond acceptor. And it also dissolves a wide array of organic molecules too. And so formamide also possesses a pretty large dipole moment as well. And so that enables it to act both as a solvent as well as a reactant to naturally form things like nucleobases, amino acids, RNA oligomers. And so the primary reasons formamide is theorized to support alternative biology include, first of all, overcoming the water paradox. And so in prebiotic chemistry, water can actually be fairly detrimental because it tends to break down vital molecular bonds, such as amides and phosphodieesters through hydrolysis. Formamide enables phosphorylation as well as non-enzymatic polymerization without this limitation. So there could be an advantage evolutionarily in that regard. Secondly, formamide has a fairly wide liquid range in terms of temperature. And so it remains liquid across a much broad range. Its boiling point is near 210 degrees Celsius, and that allows it to remain stable in extreme volatile environments where water would just boil or freeze. Formamide also kind of is involved in, it could be involved in radioactive mineral synthesis. And so scientists at NASA's astrobiology program have found that natural radioactive mineral deposits can synthesize and locally accumulate high concentrations of formamide, and that provides a steady supply of this building block in early planetary environments. So that's formamide. Now let's look at some of the more outrageous things. Let's look at sulfuric acid and hydrogen fluoride. They are considered candidates for non-water-based life as well, although they are pretty strong acids. Sulfuric sulfuric acid has a pK of like minus 11. It's pretty strong. And so arguably, I would say they're less likely. But nonetheless, just because it's less likely, I think it could still be possible, right? But it's just not eliminated quite yet. The clouds of Venus also contain concentrated sulfuric acid droplets. And so some scientists have speculated that microscopic organisms could theoretically inhabit the clouds of Venus, although they have yet to find any convincing evidence of such life there. And of course, any life in this environment would also require fairly radically different biochemistry just to withstand the strong acidity. Hydrogen fluoride as well. This is one of the few simple molecules that forms an extensive hydrogen bonding network resembling that of water. So hydrogen bonding is again responsible for cohesion and adhesion. And so that's a very important property. So in theory, this makes it chemically attractive as a biological solvent. In practice, it's pretty reactive, and in fact, it's so reactive that most researchers would probably consider it very unlikely. Hydrogen chloride may be a little bit more likely. Chlorine's a little less reactive than fluorine, although HCl would be a stronger acid. Plus, HCl is also found in the human stomach, so there is some biological basis there. It's not, completely out there. But I would consider strong acids such as sulfuric acid or hydrogen fluoride to be theoretically plausible as the basis for non-water-based life, although not very likely. Possibly only for very extreme circumstances and conditions. So at present, most astrobiologists would consider ammonia, methane, ethane, and formamide to be the best candidates for a non-water-based life currently. One important point emphasized in modern astrobiology is that the solvent does not necessarily determine the chemistry. For example, a methane-based organism might still rely on carbon chemistry, while an ammonia-based organism could use many of the same fundamental building blocks as terrestrial life. And so the solvent mainly affects which reactions are energetically favorable and how quickly they would occur. So water, ammonia, and hydrocarbon solvents receive the greatest attention in astrobiology. But researchers have also explored several more speculative alternatives. And some of these include things like supercritical carbon dioxide, or liquid sulfur dioxide, or even liquid nitrogen and liquid hydrogen. Supercritical CO2 exists above its critical temperature and pressure, where it exhibits properties of both a liquid and a gas. And that allows it to dissolve certain organic molecules while diffusing rapidly through its environment. And these characteristics have prompted theoretical studies suggesting it could support unique forms of biochemistry under very high pressure conditions found on some planets. And liquid sulfur dioxide is also another intriguing possibility because it's a polar solvent and it's capable of dissolving a variety of inorganic and organic compounds, and it can even facilitate chemical reactions that differ significantly from those occurring in water. But both solvents do present fairly substantial challenges, most notably the very low temperatures. But supercritical CO2 has relatively low dielectric constant, and that limits its ability to support the ionic chemistry that's common to terrestrial life. And sulfur dioxide is chemical reactive and remains liquid only over a very narrow range of temperatures and pressures. So as a result, these solvents are generally regarded as intriguing theoretical possibilities rather than likely environments for living organisms. But nevertheless, their study broadens our understanding of the diverse chemical conditions under which biology might emerge, and reminds us that extraterrestrial life, if it exists, may exploit solvents and biological or biochemical pathways very different from those found on Earth. So what do you think? Is water essential to life in the universe? Or can we consider at least the possibility that life could evolve using alternative solvents, as Dr. Grace suggests in his controversial paper? Why don't you leave your comments down below and let me know what you think. If you enjoyed this video and my deep dive into one of the more controversial plot elements of Project Hail Mary, go ahead and hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more exciting biochemistry content. I always like to, come up with new and interesting things to talk about. And until then, if you haven't read the book Project Hail Mary, I highly recommend picking this up. You can buy this off of Amazon or any local bookstore that you have. And go ahead and see the movie, too. It's available on streaming, and I think it's definitely good. And so I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. You have been listening to Biochemistry Unfolded, from atoms to algorithms. Thank you for watching. We will see you again in the next video.